Hello everyone and welcome to our Gem Pursuit. My name is Matthew Weldon and I'm joined in our magical and mysterious pursuit through the world of antique and vintage jewellery by my trusty co-host, Alyce Ketcher. Hello Alyce.
Good morning everyone, or good afternoon wherever you are.
Well, wherever you are, this is a very exciting day because we are starting a brand new series and it's one that we have had numerous requests from listeners actually all over the world.
It took us a long time to kind of get to this because there's so many collections that we could do and we don't want to miss out on some of them. So it was a difficult one to kind of hone in on, because there's so many.
There's so many, and what's great about this topic, which we will disclose in a second, is that you can actually go and visit many of these collections, and we'll give lots of information about how to do that if you want to. And it is, of course, Royal Regalia, a History of Splendour. So first of all, Alyce, the Royal Collections. I mean, there's so many nice ones. What one are we going to start with?
So with Royal Jewels, we've got so many royal families around the world, and we have to remember that we also have a lot of royal families who are now no longer in control. So there is still collections that belonged to royal families who are no longer have anything to rule over. So we were kind of trying to figure out where we wanted to start, because there's so many, and who we would include, because do we include those who no longer rule, or do we just go with monarchies that are still currently standing? And we thought that we would start with the Danish Royal Family, and we thought we'd start here basically because they're in the news at the moment. A new king has just been crowned, so to speak. We'll talk more about that later because they don't really crown their kings or queens in Denmark anymore. But there's also a nice little connection to the Danes for Australians, because there is now an Australian Queen of Denmark. So we thought we would start there.
I think it's a great place to start, and they really do have some outrageously beautiful jewellery. Let's get started. So we're going to start off just, I think, to understand the jewellery, right? The jewellery is intrinsically linked to the history of any of the houses, and it is through history that a lot of these jewels end up being in certain collections. So we have to get just a brief overview. Nothing mad. We're going to focus on the jewellery.
I can see Matthew right now. He's sitting over there and he's got a scroll of the family tree of the Danish Royal Family.
Yeah.
I'm like, he's turned into like a family tree expert over here with his family tree of the Danes. He's like, how exactly are they royal?
Alyce, let me tell you how long it took me to comprehend this tree. I'm definitely not an expert, but the family tree at Denmark is an incredible one. And this is a royal family that goes back over 1,200 years. That is one of the longest serving royal families pretty much anywhere in the world.
I mean, with the Danish royal family, they're kind of like this really like laid back royal family, right? So like when we think about royal families, people always say it's the Queen, right? The UK Queen, Queen Elizabeth, because of the crown, and, always we're hearing a lot about the British monarchy. But the Danes, they're under the radar. But like when you kind of delve into their history, it's super impressive. The way that they were able to not only consolidate power, because that's what they originally did in Scandinavia. The Danes were actually the ones who consolidated power, brought a lot of the Scandinavian countries together under one rule. And they kind of did it in their own way as well. So it wasn't done as a hereditary monarchy originally. It was done as an elected monarchy.
In theory, yes. In practice, it tended to work hereditary.
Yes. But it worked hereditary usually, but it was something that was considered an elected monarchy up until 1660, which is when it turned from an elected monarchy into a hereditary monarchy. And that meant that only God was the one who could elect the monarch. So they were anointed. So there was a difference between the crown being put on their head by their peers surrounding them, and then God putting the crown on their head and then being answerable to God. So if you can imagine that, like 1660 was when it turned to the hereditary monarchy. But before that, we still have like nearly 100 years before that they were still in power. So it's like, it's a lot of time for them to have been this kind of tradition that they have in Denmark surrounding their royal family is huge.
Yeah, and I mean, and following that, then they turned into a constitutional monarchy, which is what a lot of monarchies in Europe certainly are at the moment. And, you know, we will go broader than Europe for this series for sure. I don't know if we can do a field trip in that case, but but in 1849, that was really the end of the absolutism, and they turned to a constitutional monarchy.
Yeah, so like the difference between the an absolute monarchy and the constitutional monarchy is when they were in the absolute monarchy, in the statement where they, you know, said that that God was the one who actually anointed the king. The document, which they still have, which is dated the 14th of November, 1665, that particular document states that the absolute monarch has 3 primary duties. Their duties is to worship God and to protect the true faith, and then lastly, to hold the kingdom together and to ensure that his powers did not deteriorate. That's the kind of legacy that we see the new monarchy kind of taking on, but in a very laid back fashion. Once it hits the constitutional monarchy, they can't become more of a figurehead of state. So the Queen Margrethe, who has now abdicated, she is known to have travelled overseas to help Danish trade deals and things like that go through. She's not allowed to be involved in political life, but she's allowed to assist in trying to help further the Denmark's prospects. So they're used kind of in a way that is extremely useful to the country. And that's a way that they kind of carry on the legacy to protect the interests of their subjects.
It's interesting to say that it's like a soft power, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
But they've done it super clever because the people really like them over there, you know.
Oh my gosh, they're
and I think was it Queen Margrethe, and this gives you an insight into Danish mentality. I mean, Denmark's great. Like, we've been to Denmark a couple of times, but it's laid back. But like Princess Mary used to go to the shop, and she used to go without the security. So.
Yeah, she still does. So the thing is that they are known for, like, you can see them coming out of the palace and riding their bikes and riding their children to school on their bikes, like with no security or anything. They're extremely laid back and they're extremely approachable. And this is like one of the things that they're really, really known for, is that they're people and they want to be seen as people. Their private lives are really open as well. We know that from Joachim, which is the brother, Prince Joachim. He has been married and divorced. It was all very open in the public and people knew that it was happening, and it wasn't something that became a huge scandal in Scandinavia. The marriage didn't work out, you know, and, you know, that happens.
They're very pragmatic like that.
Yeah, and sometimes that happens, but he wasn't crucified for it. But just to quickly go back before we move on to the next section, how did they become the royal family? Where is the lineage of the royal family today? So originally, the House of Oldenburg ruled Denmark from the time of 1660 all the way to 1863, when Frederick VII died childless. So what happened then was they traced the lineage back to the House of Glucksburg, who had connection to the royal family all the way back to the oldest king. So those who are in power today are actually the direct descendants of this royal household, which is the Glücksburg household. And that was from 1863 onwards. So they have a great lineage. The current king can trace his lineage all the way back to the very first king of Denmark. Another wonderful thing to add is that the Act of Succession in 1953 was changed to allow the monarch to become a queen. Previous to that, it couldn't be a queen, it could only be a king, which would have meant that the House of Glücksburg would have lost their right to the throne because the king had only had a daughter, which was Queen Margrethe. So she was then in 1972 crowned as queen, and her son is now the king because she abdicated on the 31st of December of 2023 on New Year's Eve. So that's where we stand today with the history of the royal family. Succession also was changed in 2009 to allow the oldest child of any gender to become a king or queen.
Proper order.
Yeah, exactly. So it allows, but the next one is a boy as well. So it'll be Christian the 11th, I believe, once his dad abdicates or passes away. And he will be half Australian. So that's interesting.
Why I, man. This is a serious collection. And what I love about Queen Margaret, before she abdicates, she's on record as saying about the jewellery that she doesn't count the carats, she counts the centuries.
Yeah.
Which
it's a very, very famous... It's a very, very famous line that she has, that she doesn't count the carats, that she counts the centuries. And when you look at the history behind their jewellery, I mean, the way that they've been able to keep their hands on some of these items is beyond amazing. So let's just split it up for once, right? Because it can get really confusing when you're talking about royal jewellery, right? Because there's usually two parts of a royal collection. Number one, there is the crown jewels, all right? And the crown jewels are usually state-owned jewels which passed down only to the ruling monarch of whatever country you're in. So it doesn't mean that it belongs to the family. It doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to state, and it passes to the ruling monarch. So that's one part. And then the second part is privately owned pieces that are passed down through the family. So they're either passed down through the family or they are owned specifically by one member of the royal family. And then when they pass away, they can leave them to whomever they please because it belongs to them. So what we're going to start off with today is going to be the crown jewels, which is state-owned items. If it's a state-owned item, it also means that it cannot leave Denmark. So these particular pieces belong to Denmark.
Yes, they belong to the crown, and I mean, they're pretty spectacular pieces. You can see them today. They're in the Rosenborg Castle, which is in Copenhagen or very close to it. I mean, Denmark has a nuance to the Danish collection as well, that they have the Danish Royal Trust collection, which we can get to that in a second. But let's focus on the crown jewels for just a moment. Can't leave Denmark, so not brought overseas on trips or anything like this, and they are extremely important pieces. There's 4 significant pieces. There's an emerald parure. Is that how you say that word?
Yes, parure.
Parure. The Danish pearl and ruby parure. I mean, we'll put links in the notes where you can actually see pictures of these because they're pretty spectacular. A crown, a brilliant diamond parure, which is really impressive diamond piece with extremely large old-cut diamonds, and the Danish rose-cut diamond parure. Now, what's important to remember about these sets, they kind of date back to Queen Sophie Magdalene, she was married to Christian VI, and in 1746, in her will, she said that these jewels could not be passed on to a specific person, but should always be at the disposal of the sitting queen. And therefore, they made that transition from the property of the then queen to the property of the state. Although the queen's the only person who can use them, they're still not hers.
It makes it super special though, because I think what she was trying to do here was she could see that there was a need. You know, these particular sets of jewels are actually there to kind of elevate you and to show your lineage, so your connection to royalty, but also to create splendor, because that's what a royal family is there to do. They're there to elevate the event that they attend. And she could see that there actually was there was nothing at the disposal of the crown for the women to wear. So at the time there was crowns for the kings and a small crown for the queen. But other than that, to large events, there wasn't anything that was owned by the state for the queens to actually wear. So she wanted to make sure that there was something available at all times.
Yeah, but I think that's a great way of putting, as a more general one, royalty is there to elevate the event that they attend. Never thought of it that way, but I think that is a key purpose, and obviously the jewellery is one way of doing that.
Well, I mean, there's different ways, right? So, like, because today we don't really see our monarchs as mouthpieces to God on earth, you know, we look at the Queen, they're a man, they're a person, right? We don't look at them like, okay, that's the mouthpiece of God on the earth. When you're delving into the past, you have to remember that their subjects believed that they're a prophet of kinds, right? So even in Polynesian culture, when those who were considered kings or queens were to walk amongst the people, they would burn smoke so that around the actual king or queen, to denote deity, to show that they were in some way different to the normal person. And you know, what better way is there to show that you're different than to say, look at my diamond necklace? People would never have seen something like these jewels that you see here. And they are magnificent. And as Matthew said, there is pictures that you can see on their website, on the specific website of the royal family, which shows you, they call these particular 4 sets garnitures, which feature, when we talk about a parure is a set. So it's, you know, like when you think about when you're wearing an outfit, you have a bag and shoes and a belt that usually sometimes somewhat match. When you're looking at a garniture or you're looking at a parure, you're looking at a set of jewellery which is created to match and kind of wear in different ways. And I think for me, the person who has worn these the absolute best was Queen Margrethe. She knew how to put together a parure.
But she was great for it because her style was very vivacious, eccentric. You know, she really wore the jewellery.
Yeah, it didn't wear her. She wore it. It was magnificent.
So still to come, we've got an amazing story about a tiara which was commissioned for the coronation of Napoleon that ended up in the hands of the Danish Royal Family. Then, as one of our favourite pieces, and it is of course a very spectacular piece. But first, we have some very beautiful pieces in stock in the shop this week, which are on our Instagram. Alyce, can you tell me about one of them, please?
So I thought I'd go with a piece that is very similar to Queen Mary of Denmark's engagement ring. She has an emerald cut engagement ring that has 2 emerald cut rubies on either side of her central stone. On our Instagram at the moment, we have this incredible 3-stone emerald cut diamond ring. Now, we don't have the emerald cut rubies on either side, but we do have 2 emerald cut diamonds. And this 3-stone has a central emerald cut diamond, which is over 3 carats in size. So it is a spectacular piece, fit for royalty. Please go on and have a look. If nothing more, you'll get you'll drool over how beautiful it is, and you'll see a piece that's really ready for royalty.
And if you would like to see this beautiful ring, you will, of course, find it on Instagram at Courtville Antiques. And, of course, we'll make it easy for you to get there and put a direct link into that post in the description area of this podcast. One interesting thing about the crown jewels, they're still on the crown jewels, as you explained, that are owned by the state, but the Queen uses them, is that as with lots of jewellery, and this is why, from a sustainability point of view, we love working in the antique jewellery business, is because the stones, they can really be used forever, right? Especially diamonds, they don't ever change, right? I always use the example that we had a diamond cross in the shop, which is from the 1600s, and literally the diamonds looked like they were faceted yesterday. They were so crisp. But it is the case with these crown jewels that their current format is not the way they always were. They were designed in 1840 by a jeweler called Carl Martin Weishaupt, which I hope is a good pronunciation. I think that's German as far as I know, but no, it is German. Yeah, he's from Hanau in Germany, and he worked there from 1801 until about 18. So in 60 years, the firm manufactured jewellery, but he designed them in 1840. A lot of them they were all the stones, obviously, that were there before that, but there was also some additional ones that were added into them, and it was Christian VIII's wife, Queen Caroline Amalie. She designed all these pieces and used the historical stones, but also added in her own ones. And actually, that was a feature of the Danish jewels, is that the queens every so often seem to add in their own pieces.
But they also have them adjusted. So your head is not the same size as my head. So the crown has to be adjusted to fit my head because your head is a lot bigger than my head.
Thanks, Lisa. It's there to house all those brains.
But you have to have it adjusted, number one, to fit you. But one thing that I would mention about one of the parures, because I don't think you're going to do the emerald one for your favorite piece.
No.
So one of the parures is emerald. Now this is amazing. It has a spray necklace to die for with emeralds that are of Colombian origin. They're
so nice.
Incredible. Now, the crown itself is, the whole thing is done in the Victorian style, and a favorite of Queen Margrethe. But if you look very closely at the old mine cut diamonds in this particular tiara, they're almost of a warm yellowish tone, but they're not fancy yellow diamonds. They're just a warmer hue of old mine cut diamonds. Now, this is something that people get really caught up on all the time with us, like literally all the time. I hear people, I want a white diamond. There is royalty out there with tinted diamonds.
Super important, yeah.
And they're beautiful. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a more magnificent piece on an older woman. Queen Margrethe looks literally like deity in it because it is so gorgeous. So it's really important to remember that, like she said, we don't measure our stones in carats. We measure them in centuries. and she's wearing,
I love that.
she's wearing something that's centuries old, and she knows that that is super special. She's not going, oh yeah, but the diamonds are only like a KLM color. She's not saying that at all. She's going, look at my tiara. Like, you wish that you had this. Who cares what the color range of the diamonds are? It's about the performance, and the performance of these pieces is otherworldly.
Yeah, that is a spectacular piece. And I know we're going to mention that phrase once more before the end of this podcast, because it just captures it so well. But I think we also have to mention that there's the Danish other part of jewellery.
That's owned by the state.
That's owned by the state. The Danish one has a slight nuance. It's called jewellery that's in the Danish Royal Property Trust. Mm-hmm. Now, there's also personal pieces that the people own just themselves.
Which we'll go through that very quickly after these two, because it's the two that you're going to talk about, isn't it? The crowns. Yes,
but this trust was established by Frederick VIII and Queen Louisa in 1910, and the purpose was to secure gold, silver, and other valuable objects which are desired to be kept in our family, and therefore shall pass undivided from king to king of our house. There is a Danish word to describe the jewellery in this collection.
Off you go, Matthew.
I don't even know. There's like the O's with a line through them, which I don't know. It says "Löser Fideikommos."
We apologise to our wonderful Danes out there who might be listening.
And if there is any Danish person who's listening, I know we actually, I know for sure we have a good following in Sweden. Hello, Sweden. But if anyone's Danish, let us know how to actually say that, because I'd love to hear. But the jewels in this Danish Royal Property Trust, they cannot be sold or dismantled, but they can be taken out of the country. So for international engagements, it'll be these pieces that you'll see. It was greatly enhanced by Queen Louisa's, because she got a huge inheritance from Dutch, German, French, and Swedish ancestors, and these are all kept in the Royal House of Denmark, which is the other castle actually that's in Copenhagen, where a lot of the royalty live.
But we'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about that. But that's a key element. This Löser Fideikommos, a super important part to understand the Danish royal families of the Crown Jewels, this Danish Royal Property Trust, and then also personal pieces.
Yes. Before we move on to the personal pieces, the Crown Jewels, the last two pieces that I want to talk to about, that is the two pieces of state royal regalia, which are really important. One, which is probably one of the oldest crowns that I've ever seen. And this is Christian IV's crown, which dates back to 1596. The piece is not in use. It was created by Dietrich Frying in Odense, and it features yellow gold, table-cut diamonds, natural pearls, and enamel, and the crown weighs a staggering 2,895 grams.
So that's, sorry, say that again,
2,895 grams.
So like it weighs 3 kilos?
Yes.
Oh my God.
It features figural scenes all around the crown, which is symbolic. I'm not going to go over all of them because there's a lot on it. You need to go and see this. We're going to put it in the show notes. It's fascinating. But I'll tell you about one of them. The front of the crown has an enameled pelican. So this is really like, I was like, Denmark and pelicans, who knew? But it has a pelican on the front of it, which is pecking itself and bleeding and feeding the blood to its offspring.
Lovely.
Now, this particular figural scene is supposed to symbolize the need for every monarch to sacrifice their own blood for the good of their subjects. So, like, it's so fascinating. If you want to see something that's very, very detailed and ornate from 1596, like from that century, this is the piece to look at. It is stunning. Now, it's not in use anymore, but you can go and see it, and we'll tell you at the end where you can go and see it. The second one is the coronation crown, which was Christian V's crown, made in 1670 to 1671 by Paul Kurtz, and he made this in Copenhagen. It's made out of yellow gold, table-cut diamonds, 2 large garnets, and 2 extremely large sapphires. One of the sapphires dates back to one of the very old kings of Denmark. And this particular crown is only used by the king or queen once in their reign. And that is when their coffin sits inside the castle after they've passed away. And they also have these massive silver lions, which can also be found in their collection. And they're also used to protect the coffin and the crown whilst it's out there for viewing. So it's the only time it's used now. But those 2 crowns are really important parts of the state and royal regalia. And really funnily, when they went through hard times, they were pawned. The oldest one, the 1596 piece, was pawned off, and one of the kings then went back to get it. So it's very, very lucky that they're still intact the way that they are now, because they've got table-cut diamonds in it, and the likelihood that they might have been melted down was very high, but they were able to get them back before anything happened.
And the worst thing about that is when they are melted down, it's for the carats, not the centuries.
And that's the centuries. Like, imagine a tiara, a crown, an actual crown from 1596. Like, that is beyond amazing.
It is truly amazing, and well worth looking at the show notes and checking these pieces out.
Yeah. Now, I know we're really, really late in, but I'll quickly go over a few of the other pieces which are in the personal collections. Okay, so this is going to be really quick, and I'm really sorry because we're running out of time, but there is a lot. So we have in the personal collection also, it's called the Khedive, I think is the way that you say it. I'm really sorry if it's not. The Khedive of Egypt tiara. This tiara was gifted to Princess Margrethe of Connaught when she wasn't even connected in any way to Denmark. She then became the Crown Princess of Sweden because when she was in Egypt, her sister was supposed to be kind of wooing Prince Gustav, who was the future king of Sweden. And he actually ended up falling in love with the wrong sister. So he fell in love with her instead. So he fell in love with her in Egypt. Before they even left Egypt, he then proposed to her in the British consulate in Cairo. And the families were.
I would love to admit a fly on the wall for that trip. That would have been interesting.
But you know, I don't think the parents were too upset because they still snagged the prince.
They got what they wanted. It wasn't in the way they thought.
They still snagged the prince, but it wasn't for her sister, Princess Patricia, but it was for her.
But I wonder, did the relationship of the 2 sisters then sour after that?
Well, who knows? Because Margaret fell in love with him too. So it was known as a marriage of love. And they got married. And because Egypt was such a special place to them, the Khedive of Egypt at the time then commissioned a tiara to be made for her for a wedding gift. And so she got this beautiful Cartier tiara, which is like a scrolling garland work. 'Cause this is in around 1905. It's just scrolling garland work, and it is absolutely stunning. Now, she passes away very early after having 5 children. So they get married in 1905 and she dies in 1920. So it's very short-lived. And she only has one daughter, Ingrid. And that daughter goes on to marry the monarch of Denmark and brings this tiara with her. So it's now in the collection of the royal family, and every single female descendant of her, which is obviously the royal family, wear it as their wedding tiara. Queen Margrethe wore it as her wedding tiara, and it's still used today as a wedding tiara. We also have a few others, including newer pieces. So you've got a new piece which is called the Midnight Tiara. It's a contemporary tiara which was made in 2009. And it was made to portray the Australian wattle. And that was of course, for Mary Donaldson, who is the Australian queen, who is now the Danish queen. She's Australian, but she's Danish queen now. But it was made with her in mind because it's Australian's national flower. And it's made out of moonstone berries that are nestled amongst leaves of rose gold, silver and white gold. And it also has diamond little blossoms on it as well. So you can see that. It's not actually owned by the family. It's actually owned still by the jeweler, but it's used exclusively by Mary Donaldson. And then we have the pearl tiara, which was a gift in 1825 to Princess Louise of Prussia on her marriage to Prince Frederick of the Netherlands. Upon her death, it then went to her granddaughter who married the Danish king. And so that's still in the royal family as well. But there's quite a few others, but those are some of the really important ones that are still used today.
So many beautiful pieces in the collection. I mean, this next section that we're going to do, it's nearly one of the trickiest ones to actually pick out one to explain in detail. Your favourite piece, Alyce, of the Danish Royal Jewels.
I think we should start off with yours, just so that we don't have the same one.
Well, I have done two, just in case of a backup, because we learned in the last series these coincidences do happen. So, but look, I'll go with one, and it is a piece that's often worn by your fellow countrywoman, which is important. The reason I want to talk about this particular piece is because, well, number one, the way it actually got into the Danish Royal Collection is pretty interesting. And, you know, there's been a few instances that these interesting kind of marriages and things happen, but the jewels seem to end up in the Danish royal family all the time. Don't know what happened there.
I don't know either. I'm looking back and I'm like, if I was the Swedes, I'd be like, hello, you're taking half of our jewels with you.
They did, but the Swedes have a pretty good collection as well. And there was a pink topaz one in the Swedish collection, which is outrageous, which we may get to. But this particular one, it's called the Danish ruby parure. Now, again, there's parures and there's parures, right? I don't want to say that word too many times in a row, but this has a beautiful crown and an incredible necklace that when worn, it sits on the collarbone, but it splays quite wide. So obviously a necklace normally, you know, goes around your neck and might have a couple of things, you know, that hang off it. But this, the scale of it is hard to comprehend. It's definitely what we're looking at, but the way it got into the Danish royal family is super interesting. So, and it's, you know, it's a story of history, right? So this particular ruby parure goes all the way back to Sweden losing Finland to Russia. In 1809, Sweden lost Finland to Russia, right? Finland used to be part of the Swedish Empire, and then it was ceded to Russia. But this was huge news in Sweden. It was seen as, you know, disaster to have lost Finland. Really, national psyche damaged, everything like that, right? So at that time in Europe, the Napoleonic Wars were going on, and the Swedes thought, right, how are we going to get Finland back? This was the key thing. How are we going to get Finland back? I mean, as if Finland wasn't its own like entity, right? It was just something to be bartered with. But they realized, hold on, well, we need, you know, a really good general. And where are the best generals at the time? They're in France. Napoleonic generals, they were thought to be brilliant, but they needed a shrewd general, right? And there was a French general called, at the time, Marshal Bernadotte, who the Swedes invited him to be Crown Prince of Sweden with a view, obviously, to getting Finland back. So he was married to a lady called Desiree Clary, French lady. But when she moved to Sweden, she didn't really like Sweden at all. She said there was 2 winters in Sweden. There was one that was white and one that was green. Right. So just.
Oh, she's so great.
So she went back to Paris, right, and left Monsieur Bernadotte. You know, she also allegedly, well, it's not allegedly, she had an affair with a French man in Paris, a gentleman there. So, you know, maybe it wasn't just that she didn't like Sweden, okay? But she only came back to Sweden, actually, when her daughter was getting married. Now, her daughter got married to a Norwegian, but Desiree's granddaughter then got married to, we're going to have to cancel a bit of the fact. See, I told you, I have this map of people, but what happened was, right?
This is what happens when you talk about royal families. That's why I really dumbed mine down quite a bit. It's just that it's hard to follow. When you're looking at royal families like this, tracing the lineage back is very difficult when you don't see it in front of you because it's names, and especially with the Danish royal family, the way that the crown has passed down, it is tradition for the men's names to be either Christian or Frederick. So, for instance, the king now is Frederick. His son is Christian. His father was Christian. His grandfather was Frederick. And it goes back like that. It's every second, it goes Frederick, Christian, Frederick, Christian, Frederick, Christian. And it's a tradition in Denmark. So it's really difficult to kind of like trace it back and know which king you're talking about because their names are Frederick and Christian, always.
Yeah, well, actually, no, it's just I didn't mention one of the key parts at the start. The French general, the reason he actually was the one who had the ruby parure in the first place.
Yeah, he had it made.
He had it made, but because Napoleon was seen as a bit of an upstart, and to get credentials with all of the European aristocracy, he gave his generals lavish salaries, lands, holdings, and they bought their wives at the time incredible jewellery.
But the thing is, this particular parure that you're talking about is extremely famous because in 1804, when Napoleon was actually his coronation, it's why it was made. So if you look at the painting that is made for the coronation, you can see the tiara in it. She's standing behind Josephine, holding her veil and her handkerchief, wearing this particular tiara. So like the actual queen today, who is from Australia, is wearing the tiara that was in that painting
for
Napoleon's coronation. Napoleon Bonaparte.
So it goes Napoleon Bonaparte's coronation, French general needed in Sweden, their grandchild marrying a Danish man from the house of Glucksburg, and that's how it ended up in Denmark.
It's amazing. Like, this is the thing when people say to me, like, jewellery, like this, all jewels tell a story. And this particular piece, like, I'm so glad that you did it, Matthew, because it really is such a standout piece from their collection. Like, it is so important to the family. And the fact that Mary Donaldson, it was the first tiara that she actually ever wore, and she wasn't a part of the royal family yet. It was at her engagement dinner that she wore it. So imagine like your in-laws allowing you to wear something so important to the family, so historically important to the world for your engagement dinner. There's not much more of a nod of approval that you could get than that.
No, and Queen Margrethe actually added a brooch to this that had a miniature of her father, and Queen Mary, when she got it, changed that brooch and added in a miniature of Queen Margrethe, which I think is quite a nice touch as well. So definitely want to look at a really incredible history and an incredible piece as well. And the tiara in it looks spectacular. We got there in the end. What one would you pick out of all the pieces of the Danish royal collection?
So I had to champion my girl Mary. Yeah, no. Yeah, got
it. It doesn't come as a huge surprise.
You got to champion your girl Mary. So Mary, I'm going to really quickly go over their love story because it's important, people. It's important. So in the year 2000, Australia, it was a really, really big thing. Australia got the Olympics in Sydney, right? It was a huge thing. So in the year 2000, Mary Donaldson, who is a really avid sailor, she is in Sydney for the Olympics. She's an avid sailor and she's in this pub, which is called the Slip Inn.
Nice.
And she's there and a lot of other avid sailors are also there. Who happens to be there but Frederick, the Crown Prince of Denmark? Now, she didn't know, she was introduced to him, right? She didn't know until half an hour later that he actually was a prince, a crown prince, no less, of Denmark. So they met initially here at the
So how does that
Olympics.
conversation go? Like, what do you do for a living?
No,
Like-
she didn't find out from him, obviously. Someone came up to her and goes, do you know who that was that you just shook hands with or you just met? And she's like, no. And they were like, well, he's a crown prince. Now, I don't know if that was like, oh, okay, he's a crown prince. Maybe he's a little bit more attractive. But anyway, they met in the Slip-In and the rest is really history. She slipped in. So into the royal family. So in 2004, she gets married. But this is amazing, right? She goes over to Denmark because the relationship's getting very serious, and she actually learns Danish like within months. When I'm talking months, I'm talking, I think it's about 3 months that she learns how to speak Danish fluently. She does all of her interviews in Danish. She speaks to the people in Danish. And even today, her kids do tease her about certain words that she can't say, but she speaks Danish fluently. So it's quite amazing that she was able to do that. However, the piece that I wanted to talk about today is in 2004 is when they got married, right? And it was a big thing. You know, when the Danes get married, you actually wear tiaras and you wear all of your very best jewelry. And it doesn't matter if it's daylight or nighttime, like it is in other countries. You have to wear tiaras at night and all of this kind of protocol. In Denmark, it's if somebody's getting married and it's a royal wedding, the tiaras come out. So it was a spectacular show of tiaras. But on the 14th of May 2004, Princess Mary Donaldson, or Mary Donaldson at the time, steps out of the car and is wearing a new tiara. Now, this particular tiara is quite small and it's made out of diamonds and, of course, turns into a necklace. But what's really sweet about her wedding tiara is that it was a gift that was acquired by the then Queen of Denmark and her husband as a gift to Mary. Now, the thing is most of the times when you have wedding tiaras, they're something that is borrowed from the royal collection. They're not yours. They're borrowed. And they're used for the day, and it's special, yes, but it's used for the day and that's it. This was actually acquired. They bought it from, it's an Edwardian piece, and it was bought from auction, and they actually bought it for her as a personal gift, which is really important to mention because it was kind of a way to, number one, start her own collection, because majority of brides don't get their own piece, but also a way to kind of show that they approved of her, knowing that she would be the future Queen of Denmark. So she still wears it today. I think it's a piece that we'll see her daughters as they start to come up now into public life. I think we'll start to see them wearing it as well in certain things. Like they always wear tiaras for their New Year's parties and things like that. So I think we'll start to see it again more often. But I thought it was a really nice gesture from the royal family to give someone who was marrying into the royal family, who obviously didn't have any of her own jewels like that, something that was her very own.
I think a lovely gesture, and they really seem to embrace her, which is kind of not what you'd always expect with royal families. They almost seem to don't want to take in outsiders.
Yeah.
But no, she has definitely slipped into the role perfectly. And finally, because I know this is this episode was always going to be a bit long because we kind of had to frame the episode, and also the difference between the crown jewels and the jewels that belong to the members of the crown family is different. So
and we only touched on a very small amount of them. So like you can go in and have a look and find out more about personal pieces that they own, because there's a lot. But when it comes to the state and royal regalia, Matthew, where can we find them? The personal pieces we know we can't see, right? Unless we see them on the person. But where can we actually see the pieces that are owned by the crown?
So you can see those if you travel to Copenhagen in Denmark, which is obviously, if you're based in Europe, very easy to get to. You could just drop into Copenhagen and have a look in the Rosenborg Castle. You would need to book a ticket, but you can go in and see the 4 parures on display in that castle. And
so when are we going?
Well, I don't want to allude to that, but there might be a future episode of it. But what I would say is that those crown jewels are used, they are used from time to time by the royal families. So you would want to just double check that you don't visit
during a state dinner
or something like that.
Or the New Year's party, or usually big birthdays, like their 18th birthday is a huge one over there, so they'll all be wearing their jewels.
Yeah, but it's a rare thing. You'd be very unlucky to go to see them and them not to be there, right? And I'm sure one or two, some of them would be there anyway, but that is where you can see them. Obviously, the other ones, I mean, they're in the private quarters of the royal family, so you won't be able to see those, but they do wear them, and you will see them in the press, in media, and in different social engagements they go to. So on that note, I really hoped you enjoyed listening to our first episode of our Royal Regalia, A History of Splendour season. I know I've really enjoyed it, and Alyce, thank you very much.
This is going to be a really, really great season, guys.
We have notes on everything we spoke about and links in the description area of this podcast. And of course, thank you to our podcast producer, dustpod.io. Until the next time, from me, Matthew Weldon, see you very soon.